What about Savannah, Georgia? We need stories out of Savannah. Why are you ignoring Savannah? Comments like these have become regular over the last few months. Well, I haven't been ignoring Savannah. In fact, I've been reading over and over legends out of Savannah for a long time now, discarding the dime a dozen accounts of, quote, haunted hotels that boast their accounts on all of the come stay here and bring your money articles. Room 123 or 456 is haunted because someone died in that room, although they can't tell you who that person was, why they were there, how the accounts of today's hauntings relates to their death. But there's a ghost in that room, honest. Now, here's your bill. I know that sounds a little harsh. I know there's a dark history in Savannah. Hell, everyone knows that. I know this for a fact, as my family has personal ties to the story Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, something I've been asked to stray away from, at least for the time being. Anyway, the tourist attractions make researching things there at face value a bit tedious. So I finally decided that Savannah needed my full attention. So I decided to do what any amateur historian would do, or should do. I went back to the beginning, then worked my way forward through time until something grabbed my attention. So, how long into the future of Savannah from its original founding did I have to virtually travel? Just a few months. Everyone loves a good, strange, weird, or bizarre story. Well, welcome to the American South, where dark legends and haunted history lurk around every corner. Where superstition, folklore, and a touch of backwoods magic blend with everyday culture. Some say, in order to survive. This is Dixie After Dark. Savannah, Georgia. That's right, we're finally going there. After weeding through all of the tourist trap ghost stories that would make a 5-minute video boring as hell, I finally decided on one that has a bit of history behind it. A ship landed in Yamacraw Bluff in the fall of 1733, a place that would later become Savannah, Georgia, mere months after the founding of the colony. There were 40 Irish slaves aboard, indentured servants, tomato. There's different views on that, so we're just gonna leave that there. You decide which camp you reside in while we continue on with the story. Let's just point out here that in the colony's original charter, slavery was outlawed. So, quote, indentured servants were quickly found to be a convenient loophole for the people there until slavery was eventually legalized years later. Savannah was meant to be a buffer between the Spanish colonies of Florida and the English colonies of South Carolina, but it quickly found itself in the cash crop business, needing as many workers as they could find. Out of the 40 Irish aboard that fateful ship, or the 40 surviving people that is, were two people in particular, Richard White and Alice Riley. Illness and death by starvation had ran rampant during the voyage from Ireland to the New World, but despite their situation, Richard and Alice found themselves falling in love with one another. And, as luck would have it, both Richard and Alice were purchased by the same master, a man named William Wise. William Wise was known as a less than desirable person. He already had a reputation of being untrustworthy in England. He had originally applied to be on the charter list for the new colony of Savannah while still in England, but was declined when it was found that the person he paraded around as his daughter was really a prostitute that he kept in continuous employment. Regardless, William Wise made his way to Savannah anyway, where the colony's founder, General James Oglethorpe, sent Wise to oversee a cattle farm on Hutchinson Island. It's said that Oglethorpe did this rather than send him back to England, something Oglethorpe viewed would be more of a punishment on England itself rather than on Wise personally. Later on, Richard White and Alice Riley were, quote, assigned to William Wise, according to Thomas Christie, the town recorder at the time. In a letter from Christie to General Oglethorpe, it's recorded that William Wise was in poor health and confined to bed. Richard White and Alice Riley were assigned to take care of Wise's care and hygiene. It's said that Wise made their days unbearable, mostly with lewd comments and sexual advances on Alice daily. The following year, on March the 1st, 1734, the master, William Wise, was found dead. Reports from the time speculate the cause of death to be strangulation, as well as drowning, being found with his neckerchief tied tightly around his throat and his head submerged in a pail of water, making this the first recorded murder in the colony of Savannah. And by anything else I could find from the time frame, coupled with the fact that Savannah was the first colony in that area, this was potentially the first murder recorded in what would become the state of Georgia. The general theory at the time was that Richard and Alice had had enough of William Wise and his actions, and took matters into their own hands. After the murder, the couple ran away and hid on nearby Hope Island, where they were eventually captured. In a letter from Christie to General Oglethorpe, dated December 14, 1734, he states that Richard White was the mastermind of the crime, but that Alice Riley worked under the direction and influence of White. A pail of water was brought into the bedroom of William Wise under the disguise of bathing him. Richard White set about the task of combing Wise's hair, then grabbed the man's neckerchief and twisted it until Wise was nearly suffocated. At the same time, though, Alice Riley plunged Wise's head into the pail of water, holding his face beneath the water until the struggling had stopped. A month later, an early settler of Savannah, Edward Jenkins, wrote to General Oglethorpe describing how Richard White had escaped jail, but was quickly captured by brothers Henry and William Parker. Jenkins points out that both Richard and Alice denied killing William Wise. Both Richard and Alice were charged with murder, and Richard White was immediately hanged for the crime, making him the first execution in the colony. Alice Riley was spared from execution, though, because she was found to be pregnant at the time. The mercy from those over the colony had limits, though, it would seem. Right after the birth of the baby, Alice Riley was taken to Percival Square and hanged, making Alice Riley the first woman to be executed in Georgia. The last historical mention of Alice Riley is in a letter dated March 19, 1735, from Thomas Christie to General Oglethorpe. In the letter, near the end, Christie mentions that Alice was hanged some months ago, and that her baby had since died. Alice's baby, a son named James in the letters, is said to have died just 2 weeks after Alice was hanged, and they were buried together. Percival Square became the spot of a permanent gallows for a while, earning it the name amongst locals as the Hanging Square. Many still refer to it today as the Hanging Square, even though the original name of Percival Square was later changed to Wright Square. The square is also the burial place of a Creek native leader named Tomochichi, who was a friend of Savannah's founder, James Oglethorpe. According to General Oglethorpe, Tomochichi was instrumental in the founding of Savannah, and was thus given full military honors at his burial in the center of Percival Square. His burial site was marked with a pyramid of stones gathered from the local area, in accordance with Creek culture. But in 1883, the monument was removed by local citizens and replaced with a monument honoring William Washington Gordon, despite objections from Gordon's own daughter-in-law. Many locals say that the spirit of Alice Riley never left Wright Square. Even today, the spirit is said to be seen roaming the area of Wright Square, most notably being witnessed by pregnant women or mothers accompanying small infants. There are several tours that go through Wright Square, and even almost 300 years later, Alice Riley remains one of the favorite characters associated with Wright Square, and it seems that the tradition will continue for many more years to come. Over time, the story has been romanticized, often pointing out how difficult Richard and Alice's lives could have been as indentured servants, choosing to focus more on the ruthless accounts of William Wise rather than the actual crime that was committed. But even still, two things can be true at the same time, right? Some of the tours say that Alice Riley was hanged while still pregnant, and that is why her spirit seems to haunt passerbys that are also pregnant or with a small infant. Although historically saved letters tells us that this is not the case. A few of the tours say that Alice was hanged for 3 days in the square, because it took her that long to die. And then the body mysteriously disappeared from the noose. Again, something that isn't historically documented. One tour even claims that Alice Riley was a witch. She put a hex on the town of Savannah before her execution, and that's why no Spanish moss grows on one side of Wright Square. Because, yeah, I guess that really showed them. The story of Alice Riley continues to grow more into a tall tale than the actual historical account, and it shows no sign of stopping anytime soon. Regardless of what has been added to the story or the crime that took place, Alice Riley was still a person that was stripped away from her newborn son and executed. This much is documented, and tends to support the sightings today of her spirit approaching pregnant women and mothers, frantically searching for her own lost son. Whether Alice was an accomplice to the murder, forced into actions by Richard, or completely innocent, the idea of her being removed from her newborn and immediately sent to her own death does get some sympathy from me. And with all that bearing down on her, along with the dreadful cloud of death hanging over her throughout her entire pregnancy, it's not surprising that reports of her lingering spirit still persist today. That's a heavy emotional scar that would have been left in that community. We've seen time and time again how tragedy and emotionally charged events tend to leave its mark on an area, and it's reported that Savannah, Georgia is full of these. We'll continue to weed out these stories and see what we can find, But as of now, first in, best dressed, right? What better place to start on the history of Savannah than the absolute beginning?